All right, so welcome to our second session of the collaborative walkthrough series. Our first one was on February 1st. When we take a look at our resources, we'll see that the video and all the resources for that are all in our dashboard. Today is the 15th, obviously. We also have two upcoming sessions on March 1st and March 15th. And we will talk a little bit more about what will happen at those when we get to the end. So our outcomes for today, or excuse me, for the whole series really, are that we really wanted to strengthen our district continuous improvement teams and processes. We spent a lot of time at the last meeting really getting into what are those teams and process setups that we need to make sure that we can actually enact this whole thing called continuous improvement. We definitely want to build our understanding and fluency around the continuous improvement process itself and the use of the platform. And so again, last time we talked a little bit about the difference between process and platform, and we'll continue those conversations throughout the rest of the series. And one of the big things that we really wanted to emphasize throughout the whole series is this importance of monitoring and adjusting. It's really what makes continuous improvement continuous. And we do have a full session dedicated to that at our March 1st session. But pretty much everything that we talk about is going to kind of relate to that. If we want to make this continuous, then we really need to be monitoring the things that we're putting in place and making adjustments as we go. So we'll definitely get into more detail about that. And specifically for today, we're going to start off doing a little bit of thinking about this idea of continuous improvement work in relation to the context that we're in right now with the global pandemic that's ongoing and those sorts of things. So definitely this is something that I was reflecting on after we ended our last session and also with the breakout room that I was in, and wanted to bring up just a couple of thoughts on that. And then the majority of our time today is going to be about talking about strategies. And that is really about how we select strategies, how we use strategies, how we actualize strategies. So that's going to be the main topic of our work today. So I am Dave Hunt. I am the Continuous Improvement and State and Federal Programs Consultant with the Muskegon Area ISD. And so I work with schools every day on their continuous improvement stuff. I also help them with all of their title grants and other state and federal programs. And Hilda is my partner in crime today.
Morning, everyone. Hilda Irani, Dearborn Public Schools. I'm a consultant for recruitment and retention for our new hires, as well as I support the work in our continuous improvement. So welcome, and hope you enjoy today's session.
So usually we have a third person helping out, Mike. Mike is the continuous improvement and the science consultant at the Ottawa ISD. However, I would like to give a quick update on Mike's status. He is currently somewhere warm, sunny, and so this was a picture that he sent me on Monday, or it was a Sunday that he sent this picture to me. And so I figured that I would have to put this in here. I told him that he wasn't going to get away with just bailing on us. We needed to get a little bit of an update. So apparently he's doing the things that Mike likes to do, which is hanging out in the sun and fishing. So everybody can wish Mike well on his journeys. How's that? Okay, so just a few more logistics items. Hilda's been putting the link into our dashboard in. It's also always available at that bit.ly address, that 22 MICIP collab, and the MICIP is all caps. And so you're always welcome to do that. You can bookmark it, you can add it to your drive, but that is the dashboard that we're going to use for the entire series. And the recorded content is always going to be posted in the dashboard. You're welcome to share the dashboard. There's nothing, outside of who's registered, and all the stuff is available. It's free. You can share it with anybody that you'd like to share. And as far as our sessions, you're welcome to participate asynchronously by watching the videos and following along, or just using the resources. You're also, of course, welcome to be here live like you are today. But if you want sketches, that's only available if you're here in person, and make sure that you sign in and sign out. So last time, I know that there were a few hiccups with being able to get in. And so basically I made everybody was here the entire time. So this time, if you can make sure that you sign in and out, our sketch coordinator will thank you and me for that. I think last time we did a pretty good job of this, that people really were participating in chat. If they had questions, they put them in the chat, and our facilitators can answer those. But we have a lot of expertise in the room today. There are a lot of other people that are in roles like mine, ISD people or people from MDE. And so there's a lot of people that can help out and provide answers. So this is not like, Hilda or I are like holding all the expertise here. So we really want, if somebody puts a question in chat or you have a great resource, please make sure that you share that, or a great experience. Like I said, we really want to try to crowdsource those answers. And along those lines, the resources that we're sharing are not the only resources about this. And so we do have a resource repository that we'd like everybody to add anything to. So if you have anything that is beneficial, that's kind of on topic of continuous improvement or specifically strategies today, we'd love to have you add that to the resource repository. So I'm just going to show that real quick. So here on our dashboard, down here, it's highlighted in green where it says resource repository. And this is all the resources that people have provided when they've been at our sessions. And so there was a bunch of stuff that was shared at previous sessions last year. And then this last time we really got into a conversation about different tools that are out there to collect whole child perception data. And so a bunch of those resources got added as well. So this is just something that we're really encouraging everybody to participate with, and just another way to add your expertise to the sorts of things that we're talking about. So that link is right off our dashboard where it says resource repository. And if you just wanted to double point out that all of our resources from our February 1st session are here, including the full video. So I know I had a couple questions about where do the videos get posted afterward, and they're right within that day's items. So you always have the video, the presentation, and all of the documents that we talked about that day. Hilda, anything else to add about resources or where to find them or how to participate?
No, I will make sure I keep linking in the chat, the dashboard if they need it. And I did get a quick question about last minute registrations. Am I okay adding their name to the attendance sheet, Dave, if needed?
Yeah, actually, anybody that is here today, if you just want to, right at the bottom of the
Oh,
sheet,
okay.
you can add yourself. If you got invited and didn't even register, but somebody just shared the link with you, that's fine too. Just go ahead and add your name at the bottom. And you'll see that those are all highlighted in green. So our registration people will probably just reach out to you to say, hey, if you want sketches, please register. So, but it's totally fine if you're not registered at this point. Anybody's welcome.
Oh, yep, it's all green at the bottom there. I see that. And like I said, everyone on today's call can edit that sheet. So please feel free to, add in your name, pick number and stuff, and then they'll reach out to you. Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
You got it. Okay, so today we do have an optional session that's at 10:45. Our main session today is from 10 or until 10:30, and then we'll take a 15-minute break for anybody that's staying for the optional session. So anybody is welcome to stay for that. And the topic for that is going to be, we're going to be digging more deeply into the My Strategy Bank. Our audience for that is anybody that wants to add strategies to the strategy bank, or if you have other further details about how the strategy bank works or what's in there, how to find it, those sorts of things. So Lisa Lockman is the Director of Operations and Grant Management for MICIP. And so she will be here to run that optional session. Laura, yes, the optional session will be recorded as well. So if you're not able to stay for it, you're always welcome to come back and watch it another time. Okay, so just wanted to do a little bit of a recap from our last session. Last time we really talked about and emphasized that MICIP is a tool and it can't do the work for you. And we really put a big emphasis on the work that has to happen outside of it. We kind of call it the pre-work. And one of the main things there is our teams. And so MICIP is really a district-led process that our buildings all participate in. And so there's some really great documents that were linked from our session one around what are the roles of district teams, what are the roles of building teams, and how do they come together to work through the continuous improvement process. Those are all linked in our session 1 area. And so that was one of the main things that we talked about there, really trying to do the work outside of MICIP. You don't need to be logged into MICIP to do all this continuous improvement work. It really helps to guide through the process and gives you a lot of good questions to ask, a lot of really great tools to document your work. But really this kind of has to happen outside of it. The MICIP can't do it for you. The other thing that we talked about is really this change from a real reliance on state assessment data to this whole idea of using whole child data to make our continuous improvement initiatives. And we really need to have a lot of access to a lot of quality whole child data. And so at our last session, we talked about what are some different ways to collect that outside of just the traditional state assessment data. And really right now, we can't really use state assessment data for much of anything, even though it was administered last year, it wasn't required. And it's going to be a long time until we get some really reliable statewide data, especially growth data. So this is a great time to make that switch to thinking about whole child data. What are all the things that you can look for that are going to affect your all the kids in your whole school community? So those are some of those main topics there. We also really kind of dug into the root cause, and we talked about you don't just have to do root cause around challenges. You can also do root cause around the successes that you're having, and really doing more of an appreciative inquiry. That was a topic of interest that came up last time. But really using the root cause tools to dig into that really helps us to avoid what we called solutionitis, where we're just kind of churning through new products or new curricula, new assessment tools, and those sorts of things, and really trying to get down to the bottom of why is this a challenge for us, or why was this initiative so successful, so that you can either replicate that or make changes for the next time. Probably where we left off last time was on setting end targets and interim targets, and we had kind of finished up with that. And that ties back to the whole child data that you selected all the way at the beginning of the process. So your end targets, your interim targets, those tie back to the sort of whole child data that you selected. So that was mostly what we talked about last time. Some great conversation, some great resources were shared. And this was from our Jamboard. We pulled out a couple of quotes from the Jamboards. The Jamboards were just a reflection at the very end. And so the first one says, the intentional focus on not trying to capture every data point is very helpful. I tend to want to include everything, which lends itself to a long and difficult to read document for some. And so one of the things that we talked about last time was that you don't need to have every single goal in MICIP, and you don't need to have a one-to-one correspondence between your strategies and activities that are in MICIP to your consolidated application. That was something that was in place when we had Assist, and that ended up generating really, really long, 175-page type improvement documents. And so we're really trying to keep things more practical here and really focus on what's the main thing that you want to dig into, learn about continuous improvement around, and monitor and adjust. And so keeping the focus, sort of like what this person was saying. The next quote here, reassurance to focus on what's needed to excel. Less is more, and not getting hung up on the little things. And so there was a specific example that we shared there about qualitative data versus quantitative when you're making an interim target. And then this person said, simplify thinking and focus. What's the current state to setting goals and lead activities for the future state? So really just, again, talking about that focus. And I think the reason that I selected to put this quote in is these plans are for you. And so nobody's going to come in and look at your interim targets and say, well, I see that you selected qualitative for your interim target, and that really looks more quantitative. Like, nobody's going to do that. These are for you. It's for you to put this work in and to guide you through continuous improvement. The last quote that I put in, MICIP is meant to get away from just achievement on state assessments. Need to consider our current goal around state assessment and consider language around the whole child. So what this person was kind of reflecting on is maybe when they made their MICIP plan last year, they kind of stuck with that state assessment goal and hadn't been able to quite make that shift over to considering more whole child, the whole school, whole community data. And so this person was kind of reflecting on that. So just a few things from from the last time. So I'm going to run a quick poll for everybody. This was one of the documents that we looked at last time. It's linked in the session 1 area. You don't need to read this to respond to the poll. I think that it'll be kind of self-evident, but we're really just kind of thinking about your district and your district teams and that shift from a school-led process, or what this document kind of calls a culture of isolation, where we have school teams that don't really necessarily get together and operate at a district level, all the way over to that more accomplished or collaborative vision. And so this is just kind of gives us a framework to kind of think about where our teams are right now and where we are in our process. And so it's given us a little bit of a continuum here. We'll go from beginning to developing to evolving and then accomplished. And so I'm going to give a poll that just is a quick check-in to ask, where do you think that your teams are on this scale, even though you may not have read this whole document? You can just kind of holistically think about where they are on this whole scale. And then depending on where you rate yourself, this is actually a really great tool to think about. You know, if you rate yourself as developing, what does it look like to move up in the rubric to evolving? And then maybe what does it look like to get over into that accomplished category? So I'm going to go ahead and open the poll and just see where folks think that they are with that right now. Give a few more seconds. Looks like we still have a few coming in. We hit that magical 80% participation rate. That's pretty impressive. All right, I'm going to close the poll. So it looks like a little over half of us are in that developing category. We have a good amount in the beginning category, and then the evolving, those seem to be about kind of an equal spot. And then we do have a couple of teams here, or folks that feel like their teams are in that accomplished area. So this is great. This is what we talked about last time, is wherever you are right now is where you need to be. And so it's hopefully opportunities like this to learn some new things and to be able to collaborate with your teams that will help you kind of move up from that beginning to developing, or developing to evolving, or evolving to accomplished. If you're already in this accomplished spot, we'd love to have you keep helping us participate by putting in good tips for everybody else, or sharing any resources that you have. All right. So I wanted to kind of pause on this whole conversation a little bit, just to kind of situate our work in just our current environment that we're in right now. And this idea really came out of the breakout room that I was in last time. The conversation that I was having there was, you know, people in the breakout was, you know, I really would like to dig into this work, but it's just really hard to do this work right now. We can't get subs. We've had to cancel teams because we can't get subs during the day, and we want families to be able to go home at night. So we're not really having after school meetings either. And I was sitting in the meeting and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't start this whole thing off by kind of talking about the fact that everything that we're sharing is really aspirational, right? This is where we want to get to with the work that we're doing. And definitely we want to convey this feeling that wherever you are right now is just where you need to be, and how are we going to move forward. And I felt bad after getting out of that breakout that we didn't kind of start off with that conversation. And so I wanted to do that today. And I actually kind of shared these slides in this activity with a group in the Metro Detroit area. So if you were at that meeting, there was probably about 60 people at that meeting. If you're at that meeting, then you've seen this before, but don't give away. Okay. So just really want to think about our work in 2022 in the context that we're in right now. So this is what I imagine the 1920 school year was like. So we'll let that run through again. Okay, all right, everybody get a chance to catch that? Okay, so let's do a little breakdown here. So this August 2019 to the February 2020 timeframe, this is what I would call like, this is, just we're doing our regular work, right? And so I don't know about you, but I always thought of, as I was a principal and a teacher, it was really muddy work, right? You're getting in there, you're putting on your boots, you're wading in. You can tell that this person's hands are all muddy. They're obviously been doing the work, right? And so this was just, to me, this is just like the everyday work of helping kids learn and helping the staff grow and develop, right? So then something strange happened in March of 2020 that year. And so in the metaphor here, the muck man emerges. And of course, this is when, we ended up having to go on the statewide shutdown. And suddenly we were getting thrust into trying to figure out what are we going to do for the rest of the year, or what are we going to do for the next few weeks until this passes, right? And so that happened in March. And so from March to April, there was this feeling like, you know what, we're going to shut down. We're all going to go home for a couple of weeks. Things are going to really straighten out. We're going to get a good handle on this. We're just going to wait till the infectious rates are down. And so I think we can outrun this, right? So that's hopefully what this person is feeling at this point. But then we know that May, June timeframe happened, and we were not able to outrun that. And we pretty much got taken out for the rest of that year. So that's kind of my synopsis of that 1920 school year, which brings us to the 2020-21 school year. And I searched long and hard to find the very best visualization that I could find for the 2021 school year. And I have to say that this is 100% for sure it. So I was going to do maybe a little breakdown of this, but I think what I'd rather do is have a little audience participation. And in the chat, if you'd like, maybe just put a 2 to 3 word explanation or synopsis of 2021 for you. Let's go ahead and drop that in the chat. I've seen, I think hot mess has so far has been, if it was a word cloud, that would be a big one. You know what? Carrie says it was a complete blur. Yeah. Like I was trying to think like, okay, when were we in session? When were we out of session? And then it was like, were we ever in session that year? Like, yeah, blur. Yes, the fires, Marla. Yeah, Shannon they were able to get things leveled out with all that remote learning, right? But then we just had all these concerns about what's happening outside of that. Even if we were able to make things happen at our school, that dumpster fire was the world. It wasn't just our schools, right? All right, so we'll move on. This has been a little bit of a group therapy session. So Jamie, what was I thinking getting into administration? Yeah, that would have been a pretty rough year to be your first year as a principal or a central office staff member. Okay, so that brings us to kind of our current state, right? This is the 2021-2022 school year. And again, I did a lot of searching for what I would think might be the best gift that I could think of for this one. And this was what I was able to come up with. Okay, so here's my interpretation. You may have others. When we started this year, there was a lot of conversation, especially over the summer, of like, this is the time, right? We can completely reimagine education now. There's the playing field has been leveled. We don't have to go back to our old ways. We can really turn things around at this point. And so that was really kind of, as we were entering into the school year, was there was kind of this feeling of that. And I think that what maybe was missed in that was that we're still right in the middle of a global pandemic. And so that's kind of my little analogy here, right? We're the schools are the kid on the swing, and we're trying to move forward as best we can, and maybe even try to make improvements. In the meantime, we are still in that global pandemic, which is all the fire in the background. I've had people, when I've showed this to people before, they started to try to identify with individual people in the picture. They're like, oh, you know what? I'm the guy that's just, or I'm the guy that's just sitting on the picnic table, or I'm the lady that's taking pictures of everything, or I'm the kid on the swing. So I think there's different ways that we can interpret this, but I think the main point, I guess, that I'm trying to make here was that we still are in the middle of the global pandemic. I know some schools are still shut down, some schools are still remote. We've had times that in our area that we've had to shut down certain schools. Now we're getting to this part where schools are starting to say, are we, maybe now's the time to start getting off of masks and, those sorts of things. But and just over all of that stuff is just this idea that let's kind of breathe together through this and just give ourselves permission to not be so hard on ourselves, gives ourselves a break. And I think something that I know that our organization has worked on through this is trying to keep ourselves well, so that we can be the kind of leaders that we need to be for our kids and for our staff. And I think this is maybe the main point, is to not really feel like you need to change the whole world this year. This is a great time to start to reevaluate, to think through things, to maybe make some processes. But this probably isn't the year to try to upend things and completely change the world. So that is, I wanted to start off with that. I wish that I had started with it at our last session. We kind of just jumped straight into, this is MICIP, and here's the great work you're going to do. And so just really wanted to recognize that, this is where we are. These are the things that are going on around us. And there's really only so much that we can still continue to do in this situation. And that's still a great time to move forward with wherever we might be at this time. But just to try to give ourselves a little bit of a break there. So, all right, Hilda, anything that you might add to that?
No, so well said. I find that last picture just so sad. It breaks my heart, because like our kids need that time on the swing, and we need to, like you said, move forward, but just everything else is falling apart around us. So I hope we can move forward. But thank you for reminding everyone here that it's okay, whether you're developing or accomplished or whatever, that we're here to support you. It's a learning process, and it's going to be okay, right? Stay positive.
Okay, so we are going to, I wanted to just real quickly go through and just show in MICIP. One of the pieces of feedback we had was people were like, I really liked it when you went into MICIP to show a few things. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log into MICIP and just kind of do a very high level catch up to where we are in the process so far. All right, so I'm logged in as an ISD person, so mine might look a little bit different than yours when you log in, but the stuff at the top is always the same. And so I'm actually showing you our MICIP for my ISD organization. So we have 4 schools at our ISD. We have an emotionally impaired program. We have cognitively impaired program, we have a transition center, and we have a juvenile transition center, so adjudicated youth program. And so in here, last time what we talked about was we were really interested in making a new digging into data to be able to make better decisions for kids, basically, was kind of what our interest area was. And so when you're in MICIP, you always start with just what are you interested in? And then that will end up leading to a goal. And one of the things we talked about last time is every time you make a data story, there's a one-to-one correspondence. One data story ends up being one goal. And so we were interested in just using data to make better decisions. That was kind of our interest area when we got started. We didn't really know where we were going to go from there, but that was where we started. And so we selected some different data that wasn't important to us. One of the reasons that we were interested in that was because our state determinations data didn't look that great for our special ed programs. And so, we wanted to, so we uploaded our state determinations data. And then we have a locally developed targeted technical assistance process that rates people along how well they're implementing their IEPs and other pieces that will lead to the determinations data. So we uploaded all of that data. So you can see that we uploaded that for each of our programs. And then we walked through and we did the whole data story piece where we did a data analysis. We looked at the initiatives that are currently going on. We analyzed the gap between where we wanted to be and what the reality was. And we finished that with a district data story summary. So after you analyze that data, the next step is to really look at the root cause. And as we talked about last time, there are two tools that are built in. You can make a fishbone diagram or you can do the 5 whys. And last time we were here, we showed how you can actually do both of those things to really dig deeply into something. You can check out the video about that. And then another thing that you can do is you can do your own. And so we actually did a force field analysis with ours, and then we summarized that. And force field analysis is another tool you can use that's linked in our session 1 resources. So we did it our own way. We didn't use the fishbone or the 5 whys. We used a different process, and that's all okay. So by really looking at that, we came up with a challenge statement. Our challenge statement was, if we improve systems and processes around data collection and action, then we can impact positive outcomes for all learners. And so we use that challenge statement to make our goal, so our goal is around improving our data collection systems. And from that, we set various end targets. Our work so far, we decided not to set interim targets. That may be something that we develop another time. But for us, we decided to do end targets. And so one of our end targets for our whole organization was we wanted to move our results-driven accountability on the determinations data from 20% to 60%. So a lot of times we talk about SMART goals, and you want things to be time-bound, and you want there to be this actual data that you're going to be able to see improve. And so that's what we did here. We said we wanted to see that improve from 20% to 60% by 2024. So we were real explicit about what we wanted to see. Those are those end targets. We also set some end targets around our targeted technical assistance pieces. So that was where we left off last time. And what we're going to get into this time is the strategy aspect of it. And that's where we're going to spend our whole meeting today, actually. So I'm just going to pull this out of the way. All right. So we're all caught up in MICIP. And so now we're going to get into this whole piece on strategies. So we're going to talk about how we define strategies, what we do to select the right strategies that we want to use. And we're going to get into evaluating if we selected the right strategies, and then we'll get into implementation. So this figure, I guess is the right word, comes from the National Implementation Resource Network and their branch of that MICIP, which is the scale up of evidence-based practices. And basically what this is showing is if we look over here at the end result, what we always want to see when we're trying to put something in place is we want to really see these, what they call socially significant outcomes. So basically we want to see a positive result of the things that we're putting in place, right? And so they have this math problem that shows how you can get to those socially significant outcomes. What they say is that if you if you select the right effective practices and you implement them effectively, and that happens in a context where those things will work, then you're going to get these socially significant outcomes. And so this whole concept of selecting and evaluating strategies is really this effective practice part. What we want to do when we set our goals is we want to be able to pick the very best strategy or strategies that we can to make change on that goal. And so everything that we're talking about today is really going to be this effective practice place. This is about how we're going to select this and evaluate that those are the right strategies to put into place. So I wanted to point out that there was a really excellent presentation about this that was recently done at the Continuous Improvement Facilitators Network, so MCIFN. And I checked to see that it was okay that I could share that with this group, and we have permission to do that. And so I wanted to point out that there's a full presentation on this where they just did an awesome job, and I wanted to give everybody that whole presentation. And so that is this right here where it says MICIP selecting effective strategies and practices. They actually go into quite a bit more detail than we're going to be able to go into today, especially with the hexagon tool. So I'm just going to pop this open right now. We're not going to run through the whole thing, but this was just very recently presented, and it's a really great resource. And so if we get through our session today and you're like, gosh, I really wish that we could have learned a little bit more about blank, whatever that might be, it's probably in this presentation. I'm guessing that some people that were here today actually were able to participate in the session and saw this. And this was a great presentation and a great resource. And so you all have access to this if you'd like more information than what we were able to get at today. But really the main point I guess I'm trying to make here is that there's a lot of different things that have to happen in order for you to get to those outcomes that you want. And so we're going to come back to this in a little bit after we talk through a few more things. Hilda, could you drop the link in for the dashboard one more time? So let's start off with what are strategies? So the main thing that I like to say that is super easy to remember is that strategies are the specific actions that adults will take. And so that is the bottom line on this, right? And so this fuller definition comes out of the MICIP process guide. And so I'll just give you a minute to read that, but I bolded the part that is easy to remember. So anytime that somebody says, what's a strategy? I just say that's, that's the specific actions that the adults will take. Now they include a couple of important pieces here, right? So what will they do? Who's going to take those steps? When will it happen? And then what does it look like? And so we have some guides that will help to provide a lot of detail around each of those items. So last time we talked about this whole idea, the ladders of inference. And I wanted to bring it up again because anytime that you get in the position where you're deciding what to do, it's really good to kind of check in on these concepts of this ladders of inference. So I have two different visuals of this. So this first one here talks about all the things that you have to do before you can decide what to do. So a lot of times when we see a problem, we jump straight to the top of the ladder, right? So we just go straight from here's what the problem is to here's what we're going to do. And so what this visual helps us do is just to remind ourselves how to slow down and think about the problem a little bit more deeply before we decide what to do. And so it starts down here at the available data, and then you start to work your way up the ladder, and each step of this is kind of another choice that you're having to make, and you're starting to make inferences about different things. And when we're doing that, we can bring in our own personal experience and biases. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You just need to be able to check those and understand that. So, so let's say that we identify what our problem is, and before we decide what to do, which would be strategy selection, we need to look at our available data, select the data we're going to look at, paraphrase the data, and name what's happening. And really that is all the Discover Data portion of MICIP. So that's where we select what we're going to do. We work through all of those different questions in the Discover Data portion of it. And then, we really get into that when we do the final data story. That's really this whole first part of MICIP. Then we get to explain and evaluate what's happening. That's really the root cause portion of MICIP. And so when we're doing that, this is another way of looking at that ladders of inference, that you can see kind of where there's different things that happen and more individual choices that we need to make as we kind of work our way up this. And so a lot of times people will say, like we need to get a little bit lower down on the ladder. We're starting to bring our beliefs into this, or we have these preconceived conclusions that we're already thinking. So we need to get a little bit lower on the ladder. So those are just a couple of things to think of before you decide what to do. And so I really encourage people to just kind of think of this, think about all the conversations that you had about the data that you have, about the problem that you're trying to address before you just jump straight into deciding what to do about it. So just that's a little food for thought. So we're going to get into this part about selection. Wanted to check in about a couple of things here. So one is a lot of times I'll hear things, and it's especially with new teams or teams that were really kind of rooted in that compliance mindset. They'll say, well, how many strategies do I need to have? And the answer, there's not one answer to that. So a lot of times when I'm working with districts, they will just make one strategy that applies to everybody that's, all of their buildings. And that's what we ended up doing at our MISD one. I work with other districts that they have an overall goal, but the way that each of the buildings wanted to implement that goal are different, or I should say maybe each of the levels. And so their elementary schools might have selected one strategy to address that, and then their middle schools or high schools had a different strategy for that. There's also times where there's two strategies that the district wants to take on to try to meet the goal, and everybody's going to get involved in those. So there's not one answer to how many strategies do I need. There's all kinds of different context that goes into that. And so there's not really an answer to that. Laura asks a great question about how many is too many. This is super, super important to think about. Laura, I really appreciate you asking that question. As you're going to see when we get into this, there's a lot of work that goes into selecting and evaluating that strategy, and then a lot of work that goes into implementing and monitoring that strategy. And so I think you need to consider all of those factors to decide how many strategies you want to put into place. So for every strategy that you put into place, you're going to need to think about how are we going to select that strategy? How are we going to get ready to put it into place? How are we going to implement it? And then how are we going to monitor it? And you don't want to burden your team with too many. Just like last time we said, you don't want to have too many goals. You also don't want to have too many strategies, because you want to do a really good job at a small amount of things. I think is probably the advice that I would give. I've seen, it just depends on the team's capacity and how big the district is and things like that. I think probably the most for any team that I've worked with, the most that I've seen has been 4. But they had a pretty well-functioning team. I also want to say, don't limit yourself to 4. It's just that it just depends on what your situation is, how hard those strategies are to put into place, how well developed your teams are. So on the strategy side, it's not that hard to get them selected, but really when you get to the implementation and monitoring side, that's when it starts to, you start to say, oh my gosh, there's a lot that goes into this. And that's really what we're going to be talking about at our next session on March 1st. So I would say keep it low until you really have really well-functioning systems. Let's see, Shannon says, I noticed on the drop-down menu, there are strategies that our district is using, but it's not in a strategy bank. Can we add our own strategies, or do we choose one that's closest? Shannon, that's a great question. We'll get into that. Okay. The quick answer is yes, you can add your own strategies, but you have to do it through the strategy bank. So we'll get into that here in just a second. So that's kind of some thoughts on how many strategies do I need. Then we kind of get in this place where, well, we've already selected our strategies. So like, you know, kind of where do we go with that from here? So that's definitely something we're going to get into. And then if you haven't selected strategies, or maybe you're making a new goal, or maybe you realize that you didn't put the right strategy in and you need to identify new strategies. So we're going to talk about those two things now. So there's a really, really great document that came out from MDE, the MICSI team. And I wish Mike were here because he was one of the people that helped to develop this. And it's called Evaluating Current and New Initiatives and Strategies. Lindsay, did you help write this?
At the very beginning, but no, I can't claim ownership.
Okay.
Well, leave it to Mike and Grand Cayman.
Okay. So after I get into a little bit, if anybody else has anything to add, please chime in. So I wanted to spend a few minutes in this document. And this is going to help us to kind of think about if we want to put a new strategy in, what we're going to do, and then what is different if we have an existing strategy that we want to think about a little bit more. And so this document is nice and succinct. It's a lot like those other MyCSI documents that I shared at our last meeting. And I really recommend, it's short enough that I recommend that you just read the whole thing. But I wanted to get into this section here about where it says how to use, prior to use, and during use. And then kind of just, I don't know, this whole section's really good. So I'm gonna blow this up just a little bit, maybe make it a little easier to read. So basically, this piece here about how prior to use, so like we've talked about quite a bit, is this whole concept of there's all kinds of things that have to happen outside of MICIP. And this piece here is developing a shared understanding of the broad need to be addressed. And so that really can happen through going through that MICIP process, right? Making sure that we have the data and resources we need to make that, and then identifying a team to participate in the discussion. So this is really a really important piece of what your district teams will work on, is making sure that the right strategies are being selected, and that we know how to implement them. So that's really the things that have to kind of be there beforehand. You need to know what your needs are. You need to know what all your data is and what the data is saying and how it's pointing to this. And then you have to have a team that's going to be able to make good decisions about it. So then we get into how to use during the use. Okay. And there's another great resource that we're going to pop over to here in just a minute. That came out of the Kentucky Department of Education. And what they're showing here is basically how to use the hexagon tool to be sure that the strategy that you are considering is one that's going to work for your district. And we'll take a little bit of a closer look at that here in a second. So then it gets into this whole idea of what can you do if you already have some strategies. And what the recommendation here is that if you have a strategy in place that you maybe you put it in because, you know, this is kind of what we've always had in place, you know, or this strategy just is always here, or those sorts of things, or somebody put this in last year, I'm new, I'm not sure if this is really where we need to be. They're really recommending that you can take a look at those existing strategies. If you haven't already done so, use that team-based approach and really use that hexagon tool to go through and decide, are you going to keep this or are you going to deselect it? I'm going to show you that in this in that Kentucky document here in just a minute. So that's if you have an existing strategy, is really to get in there and think about, you know, is this the right strategy for us? Did we select this? Did we have a really good team-based approach when we selected this? You know, is this based off of data? Is this something that we can implement? And so we'll go into those here in just a second. But that's if you already have a strategy in place. And then if you are going to do a new strategy, really what this is saying is like, what's the pool of strategies that we can consider, right? And there are some really great resources, and they're all they are linked out here, that gets into that we really want the strategies to be evidence-based, and so it helps to define what those are. You'll see in the strategy bank that there are ESSA ratings for how evidence-based the different strategies are, and then it gets into where can I find those resources. And there are some links right in here to some of the national clearinghouses around this. And I went in and kind of looked through each one of these. And I honestly think that each one of them is really worth exploring if you're in the space where you know what your problem is, and you're really curious as to what research says is the best, are some of the best ways to approach that. And I looked through every one of these resources, and I think that they're all worth considering. Some of them are a little more user-friendly than others. I tend to find that the more user-friendly it was, the fewer resources it had. So the ones that have like massive amounts of resources, it was kind of hard to navigate and find where those were, but you could probably find the thing you were looking for. This just took a little bit more time. So I really recommend reading this from top to bottom. It has really good advice about how to, and guidance, I should say, around how to look at existing strategies to make sure they're the right ones. And then several resources and considerations if you're not sure, what strategy to select, and how to use evidence-based to do that. So we're not going to read through this all together right this minute or anything like that, but just really wanted to show that this document is here, and it really answers those questions about, is this strategy that we have in place right now the right strategy for us, or how can we find new strategies that might align better to what we're trying to do? So I'd like to open up this piece from Kentucky, and this comes out of, again, from the National Implementation Research Network, or NERN. And I'm going to just expand this a little bit. This is where you go to really figure out and learn a little bit more about the hexagon tool. I'm going to show the hexagon tool in MICIP here in a few minutes. But this is really going to give you a lot of good guidance around how to actually use the document. So it first shows the hexagon tool. And for those that haven't seen or used the hexagon tool before, as alluded to in the last document we were showing, it's really there to think about if the thing that we're putting into place is going to work for us. And so it's broken out into these six pieces. And you'll notice that it doesn't say start here, right? So it's really contextual about where you start thinking through this. But it really gets into systems indicators are on one side of this, and innovation indicators are on the other. So let's look at the system indicators. So those are those pieces that we've talked about before of, where are we? What's our context locally? What's our team able to do, right? Those would be what I would say systems indicators. So here's where it gets into what's our capacity to put this strategy into place. And you can see that it kind of gets into what it means by capacity down here. Do we have the money? Do we have people that can buy into this? So that's your capacity. Then how does this fit in with other current initiatives? So is this really aligned with the priorities that you have? Is it going to fit within our organizational structure? Then it gets into need. Hopefully you're not trying to put anything into place that you don't need, but this will help you consider some questions around that. Did we identify the target population? Do our parents and community think that this is a need for us too? So this first side, like I said, these are these systems indicators. So that's all about you. Are you ready to put this into place? Then on the other side of it is the innovation indicators. And this is really about how good do we really think the strategy is? And so what's the evidence that supports it? Were there a lot of studies that went into this? Was it shown to be effective? Would be the evidence piece. usability is it really define what it does and how to put it into place. I like that here that it says that there's mature examples to observe. So it's like, who else has done this? Were they successful for it? What do they think about this? I like this piece too. Can we adapt it for our specific context? So usability is a really important thing to look at. And then finally, the supports. How can we get training on this? Are there experts in this field that can help us to put this into place, right? So really that's kind of an overview of the hexagon tool. And this doesn't have to just be used for strategy selection. You can use this in all kinds of different situations. You can use it personally, you can use it with teams, you can use it at a building level, you can use it at a district level. In this context, we're talking about using it to select strategies. So this is something that can be used with a team. So let's say that you have a new team that started and somebody else kind of made your MICIP plan before. And then they got sick of this COVID stuff and took a job in business. Okay, so you could take and your team could look through the strategies that were selected and really start to think about, how does this fit? And there's room on here that you could put in 3 different things. So if you're considering some different pieces, you could say, innovation 1, this is the item that we have in place right now, but we're considering maybe doing this and this. So you can put up to 3 things in here. If you had more to consider, you could kind of make your own document to do the same thing. And you go through and you just give a numerical rating on each of these. And I'll show you how that numerical rating works. It's actually built right into MICIP. So I'll show you that here in a second. And basically what this does is it just will give you a side-by-side comparison about how your team ended up rating different things. So this is a good way to look at existing strategies. This is also a good way to think about if you're considering adding new strategies or changing the strategies. So you would just go through and you'd fill that out. And then there's these consideration questions. So these are all questions that you can really talk through that kind of help to guide this conversation. I've actually worked with some districts where they asked if I would come in and help facilitate this process for them. So it's sometimes helpful to have a facilitator come in and actually do this with you. So down at the bottom, finally, it has your ratings down here. So it's a 1 through 5, which you'll see in MICIP here in a minute, where it goes from strong evidence all the way down to no evidence. And so then it kind of, you can kind of go through that. So it has one of those pages for each of the different sections. So there's 6 different things, so there'd be 6 pages. So then there's like kind of a last page where you can kind of fill it out to say, what did we think about, where did we end up with this? So this tool is it's just a very practical tool to do some of the processes that were outlined in this MDE document. So I want to pause there and just to check in. One, if there's anybody that had worked on that MDE document that wanted to, or has used it before, that wanted to point out anything that I might have missed or you thought might be important for the group. And then 2, if there's anybody that had some experience with using the hexagon tool and had any tips that they would like to share. You're welcome to put them in the chat. And if you're also welcome to just unmute and share that. But I wanted to pause to see, just get just lean on the expertise of the group a little bit here.
I actually have a question about the hexagon. We've used it when we went into MICIP. My question is, is it required or recommended that all areas are checked? Because you can go in there and check the ones that are actually viable to the specific strategy. But would the recommendation be that in order to say this is viable, that you check each area?
Yeah, so I'll take a swing at this, and then any other experts that are here are welcome to weigh in on it. Well, I just said any other experts as if I'm an expert on this. Anyone else is welcome to weigh in on this. So it's really set up that you do consider all 6 of those items. Now, there's nothing that's going to say that you need to hit a certain number on all of those items. So like there's not going to be guidance that says unless you hit a 5 on all of those, don't do the strategy. But what the research would say that was conducted out of NERN would say that you really need to consider all 6 of those items. But there's not a number, like if one of those is 1, it doesn't mean that it's automatically discounted. It just means that might be an area that you need to strengthen or think a little bit more about. Kim, does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you. Mhm.
Sure. Is there anything that anybody would add about that, or any other questions or examples anyone would like to share?
So Dave, this is Lynn.
Hey, Lynn.
Hey, so when thinking about that, I appreciate that you said that you didn't have to have that highest score, right? Because it's all also going to be based upon the context of how are we then being super intentional about closing that gap so that way we can be at a higher level of readiness for strategy implementation. What this tool is also super helpful for is that after the strategy is begun to be implemented, if this process hadn't been gone through, is to, as you're taking a look at your data, you might want to come back to the hexagon tool to find out, okay, so if we're not at high fidelity of implementation, what might be the reason? Did we not have the capacity? Did we not have the fit? Did we not have the need to be able to go back and then do that level of assessment as you're implementing the strategy, so that way you can help close those gaps as well?
So that is an awesome point. And there are actually tools built into the monitoring section of MICIP now that actually will guide you towards some of those questions. It doesn't go back to all of the things that are in the hexagon tool though. And so I really like that idea. If you're not getting the outcomes that you want when you're trying to implement something, there's always a tendency to say, we need to try something different. And what if I can paraphrase what Lynn is saying is that maybe you don't need to try something different. Maybe you need to go back and try to think about why isn't this working? And these are the questions to consider to figure that out.
Thank you.
Great point.
I piggyback on what Lynn is saying. I think that particularly those systems indicators, that's your systems level data. So if you're in that improvement mindset of we're going to identify places where we have gaps in our actual system, you may have already selected a strategy, but continuing to consider those continues to give you a beat on that monitoring of that process and that systems improvement piece. So yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you on that. The tendency is to do the tool and select based on the tool and then leave the tool behind. And I think that that would be a missed opportunity, for continuing some of those conversations and thinking. Agreed.
Thanks, Lindsay. Any other thoughts? All right. Just going to pop back over, make sure I'm in the right spot. Okay, so I want to get in now and kind of show from a practical perspective, how does this work now? So to do that, I'm going to go over to the MICIP training site. And I really recommend, if you wanted to just experiment with any of this stuff in a place where you're not going to mess up your own MICIP, just go to the training site. And I have the training site linked in our collaboration document. So it's down here at the bottom where it says MICIP Sandbox. And I have how to get in there without also kind of messing up your own MICIP. So I'll just say that it's important to open it in a guest window, incognito, in private, whatever your browser you're using, to open it kind of in a different browser than what you would be doing your normal one in, because sometimes it'll get confused about, are you trying to log into your MICIP or are you trying to log into the training site? From there, you just go to training.micip.org. And then just like you would with your normal MICIP, you go log in with my Launchpad. But from there, you don't select your own district. You select the top one, My Data Hub login, and then the login information is right here. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of show you that real quick. And so I went to that training.micip.org, click on login with my Launchpad. All right, since I was logged in earlier already, it is not going to show you the rest of those steps. So, if the good thing about this is a lot of times I'm talking to people and they say, oh, you know, I made these pretend strategies or these this pretend data story, and now it's stuck in MICIP and I can't get it out. I recommend if you want to play with something or try something out, don't try it in your own MICIP. Go into the training site and try it out there. It looks exactly like your MICIP does. So I went in here and I just made just a pretend strategy or a pretend data story because I just wanted to show what this part looks like. So we're over here in this strategy area. And this is where, let's see, define strategy implementation. There we go. In here, we can see that that there's places that we can add, you know, different strategies. There's strategies that were already in here. This is really where we kind of get in and can see all the different pieces of what you do after you've selected the strategy and that sort of thing. So for some reason, manage strategies. All right. How did I click into the wrong thing? Collaboration series. Select strategies. Okay, here we go.
Dave, just as you do this, can you verbally walk us through?
Yep.
I know you're clicking, but it would be helpful if you can just verbally do it as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's go back to the Discover Data page. And up at the top, you have some different buttons that you can go to, and this will help you get to those different steps. And I tried to go straight over to plan and then manage my strategies. But since a bunch of people have been in this today, there were a bunch of different strategies in there and it wasn't letting me get to the managed strategies. So to get to the managed strategies, what I did was I just went to the data story that I had made. So I just made this today collaboration series. And then I just clicked through. So this would have been where we uploaded our data. This was where we would have done our data story. This is where we would have done our root cause analysis and our challenge statement. And then this is where we would have defined our goal. So this is everything that I kind of showed this morning in the recap. So this next part is the actual next step after that. So after you've defined your goal and what your impact measures were, your end targets and interim targets, that's when you get to select strategies. Kim, thanks for that prompt. So when we get into the select strategies, this is where we're going to come in and it'll normally tell you, here's what your challenge statement was, here's what your goal is. And this is where when you come in here, if you don't have any other strategies, it'll say add strategy. And so this is getting to, I think it was Kim's point or question earlier, like how do you have to go through the bank, you know, those sorts of things. And so the short answer is, like I said earlier, is you have to go through the My Strategy Bank to get your strategies into MICIP. You can't just go in and type in Dave's awesome strategy or whatever, right? It has to come through the strategy bank. There's a whole bunch of things that are pre-populated in the strategy bank, and then you can add your own. And if you're interested in that, that is what our optional session is about today. How to get into the strategy bank to be able to add your own strategies. If you're at the district level, if you were to add a strategy to the strategy bank, only the people at your district will see it. So you're not just throwing it out there, and if you add a strategy, it doesn't mean that the whole world can see it. Only the people in your district will see the strategy that you added. If you're at the ISD level, you can add strategies that your whole ISD is going to see. And so we've done that at our ISD, where we went through a process to kind of curate some specific strategies that we wanted everybody to have access to in our ISD. So, so if you're at the district, you can add district level, everybody at your district will see strategies you add. If you're at the ISD, everyone will see the strategies you add for your whole ISD. And I'm not going to show you that now. That is what the optional session is about today. So when we get in here, you can search for strategies. So if you know that the name of a strategy that you want to select, you can just type it in. So I put in MTSS, and so there's a variety of different ones. You can go into MTSS for literacy, you can go into MTSS for PBIS, MTSS general, right? So you can just search for strategies here. You know, so if you're like, I don't know, we're doing something with reading, you can type that in, and you can just type that in and certain strategies will pop up. So that's one way to search for strategies. You can also browse for them. So if I go over to browse strategies, it's going to break it up into these three categories: academic, non-academic, and systems. So I'm going to just look in our academic and say, you know, I am thinking about something about attendance. You know, we have this goal of engaging students, and so we want an attendance strategy. So we could come in here, and there's a strategy around early warning indicators. So why don't we select that one? So when I click that, it's going to get in and it will tell us the description, and it get into the ESSA level and some other pieces here. And so you'll be able to see what was typed up about that. So we'll say, let's go ahead and add that strategy for consideration. Notice that it doesn't say use this strategy. Okay, we're adding it for consideration at this step. And you could actually go through and you could do that multiple times. This is really your place to decide if we're going to do these things. And so when we get into this, we can see that we have the hexagon tool. It looks exactly like it did in that other document that I showed. And it then gives you the opportunity to rate them. And you can see, to Kim's earlier question, do you have to rate each one of them? You do, because it won't let you move to the next step until you've put a rating for each one. But again, it's up to you. It's not going to say, oh, it didn't meet a certain score, you can't move on. It's not going to do that. Okay. So so really you come through and you do the rating, and it will guide you with that. So you can actually click on these different pieces, and it will give you guiding questions that you can actually ask with your group. And these are kind of more succinct than what's in that Kentucky document that I shared, but it still will help you get to that. And so whatever rating you put in here will, that rating would kind of move into this overall rating matrix. So it really helps you kind of move through each one of these questions. It gives you the prompts to talk with your group, and then you can go ahead and give it the rating. So when you're done with that, then you say, yes, I want to include this strategy in my implementation plan. So you could have a whole bunch of them in here and you only decide to implement one of them, for example. But you can put several in to decide if you want to include it. So I'm going to go ahead and say include this strategy in the implementation plan. When I do that, it gives me the option to move over into strategy implementation. And at this page, we're able to say who owns this strategy. So this might be their curriculum director. It might be a building principal if this is going to be something that's right at the building level. Julie, I'll go back and show that again here just a sec, okay? And then you have when will it start and when will it end. Sometimes you'll want that to just align with your goal. When is your goal ending? Sometimes you might want a strategy to end sooner. And then you're also able to say which building does this apply to. So if this is a strategy that you want to apply to everybody, then you're just going to say, I want it to apply to everybody, and everybody will get checked. If this is one that you're going to do and it's just for the high school, for example, then you would just select that. So I'm going to pause there and kind of go back. And kind of show that again about how that got put on there. So again, we're at our collaboration series. We walked through all these different processes. And then after we set our goal, this is to Julie's question, after we set our goal, the option was to select our strategies. we added a new strategy. And then we completed this process to consider it. And we had to select or complete the whole hexagon process before we could even try to include it in our implementation plan. And then you'll see that green check mark says this is in your implementation plan. If it doesn't say that, it's not going to show up on the next screen. So after that, at the bottom here on the blue bar, we say define strategy implementation. And now we'll see that those two strategies are here for us to work on. There's plus signs here. You can maximize or minimize those once you do that. Okay, so let's see here. Does MDE guidance go through the process to clean up current strategies instead of selecting new strategies? Laura, could you maybe unmute and go and tell a little bit more about that question?
Yeah, so you're walking through, you know, how to add new ones in that process there.
Yep.
But the first guidance that you talked about, the MDE, the MICIP, evaluating current, the current strategies.
Yep.
Does that go through, like, let's say I inherited 15 strategies, for example.
Yes.
Just use that number. Will it go through and kind of do the same process that you're doing with adding the new ones of how I can look at the relevant ones?
Yeah, and that guidance document has a section on kind of evaluating current ones. And honestly, it's very similar where you, if you know, you can kind of maybe take them one at a time and with the team kind of just run through the hexagon tool and you can see the way they were rated when they were put in. But so maybe you could talk to team members that maybe were involved in it if anybody was. But it's very similar. You just kind of run through the hexagon process and then just have that conversation. Is this something that's being implemented? Is this a priority for us? You know, are we going to be able to monitor this? You know, those are the sorts of questions that will come up because it might be a great strategy, but if you have 15 of them, there's no way that you're going to be able to follow through on them, right?
Right. So that hexagon rating is kind of like always open-ended, so to
Yes.
speak. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. And kind of to Lynn's point, you can always go back then. So if you have 15 strategies, it's like, okay, which one's the priority? Which one is going to be the most effective for us? And the tool can help you do that. Or which handful. you want a handful, you don't want a bucket full. Okay. So again, we're going to go more into my strategy bank, how to add strategies, that sort of thing at our optional session. So I'm not going to belabor this point because there's one more thing that I really want to get into, and then I want to be able to give you guys some time to get into some breakout rooms. So I'm going to go into this a little bit today, and then we're going to dig into it more significantly next time. Julie, can I catch you in a breakout? Maybe give you a couple more pointers. Okay, so there are some really great things about what to do when you're deciding how to implement your strategies. And so I'm going to show a little bit of this today. We'll get into it a little bit more next time. So the first one is a strategy implementation guide. And this was actually made by Ben Borkel when he was at Kent ISD with one of his colleagues, with Lisa Asaro. And it is a really great tool to go in and really to identify, if we're going to put the strategy in place, how are we going to do it? So what are the components of that? And often these are going to come out of research. So it will say, if you're going to put the strategy in place, you need to do these 3 things, for example. You're going to put those down as the critical component. And then you think about, what does that look like at our district or at my school? And so what do we want everybody to do? That's the gold standard. Sometimes there's acceptable variations. Sometimes there aren't. And then there's always unacceptable variations. So this is what it looks like. This is what it doesn't look like. And then there might be some acceptable variations based on your context. So I find that this is a little bit easier to understand if you look at an example. So I have some examples linked in the in here. So it says strategy implementation guide example. I also have some live examples from some of the districts that I work with. So this is from a team that I'm working with that is their strategy is MTSS, and they're using iReady to help meet some of the components of that. And you can see that this is a little bit of a work in progress for them, that they really identified the gold standard around staff training, how students will participate, how they'll analyze the data, and how they'll put these data-driven interventions into place. So they went through and they filled this all out for how to do that. And then as they're doing this and monitoring, they realized that they needed to provide some incentives for students and staff to do this work. And so that's a next step for them. They're going to come in and start to fill that part out. So I really recommend that any strategy, so this is what I was talking about when I said it's work to put these strategies into place. For any strategy that you put into place, I really recommend that you use this strategy implementation guide to figure out how to put it into place. So without this, then it's going to be really difficult to monitor what you're doing. And so this is that's going to be my segue into our next session. This was one example here. This was a secondary example. I have an elementary example. This was, this building was, had two different curricular resources that they're putting into place. So at their K2 level, they were using Super Kids, and at the 3-5 level, they're using MyView. And so what they did was they came in and they identified through their resource what were all the critical components of that they wanted to make sure that the staff did on a daily basis. And then they identified what's the gold standard for putting that into place. If there were some acceptable variations, they could do that. You'll see that that's not filled out every time. And then basically not doing it, right? So if they didn't do the daily routine, then they didn't meet that. So, and you can see that this district got really interested in this document, and they worked really closely with their staff because these were new curricular resources for them, and they really wanted to get on the same page about how to use them. And so they used this strategy implementation guide, and now they're actually able to monitor for that. Again, that's going to be what we kind of talk about at our next session. Okay, so I know we're just kind of dipped our toe in the water a little bit on this, but that hopefully you'll start to see why you don't want to have a ton of strategies, because to do it well, you really need to identify these pieces. What are the critical things, the things that have to happen if we're going to put this strategy in place, and what does that look like at our local context? So I wanted everybody to have some time to work in teams about this. And so we're going to go into breakouts, I was hoping to give you guys a whole half hour, but it's going to be a little bit shorter than that. So let's kind of pop over and take a look at that. Oh, so the last thing I wanted to say before we go into the breakouts, because once we go into the breakouts, we're going to go pretty much all the way up until it's time to just do some reflection at the end. So this was the document we showed earlier, and we identified that this part, we were talking today about this part, this effective practice, right? So that is selecting your strategy. You can use the My Strategy Bank for that. You can look into our clearinghouses that were linked in the MDE document. You can use the hexagon tool. So all the stuff that we talked about today, this is how we make sure that we're getting that effective practice in place. Next session, we're going to talk about this effective implementation. So now that we've identified the strategy, now that we know what that strategy looks like to put into place, how are we going to monitor and make adjustments to that? That's effective implementation. And so that's going to be our whole session next time. And then really this enabling context was really what we talked about at our first session. Do we have the right teams? Do we have the right processes? Do we have the right data in place? And so if you have those three things, then their research shows that you're going to be able to get the outcomes, but you need all three. You notice this is a multiplication problem. So I know this, I don't want to bug anybody with really hard math this morning, but what's anything times 0? 0, right? So it's a multiplication problem. You can't have a great enabling context and effective practice if you're not really doing a great job with the implementation, for example. Okay, so let's get into our work time. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording while we talk about this. All right, welcome back. Wanted to just get back in, close things out for the day. I want to talk a little bit about our next session, which is on March 1st. And that one is going to be all about that monitoring and adjusting. So we're going to finish up a couple of things that we weren't able to get to today and then really dig into that monitor and adjust. And again, we'll try to give you some time to do some strategizing together. And our optional session next week, or excuse me, on March 1st is going to, we're going to have a couple of districts come in and just kind of talk about their continuous improvement experience so far. So, what kind of changes do they need to make and those sorts of things. So we have a couple of districts coming in to talk about that. So that's coming up. And for today, if you could please go to the Jamboard that associates with your last name. The Jamboards only let 50 people on at a time. So if you can't get into your Jamboard, it's okay to go to another one. There's nothing magical about those. It's just, we really like to read through to see what were your main takeaways. And then we always pull some things out of that, highlight at our next meeting. And then we also have a feedback survey. Last time, a little less than half of the people filled it out. I promise that it's really short, and it's really beneficial to us if you can fill that out. And it's going to be especially beneficial because we're starting to solicit some ideas for breakout sessions for our 4th session. So if everybody could please take that feedback survey, it's really quick, and it would really help us plan for that 4th session. At that 4th session, we really want to differentiate that 4th session to either give you a lot of time to work with your group, if that's what you need, or to provide some breakouts on some specific topics, if that's what you need. So, but we need the feedback to know what to provide for that day. So if you could please take that feedback survey, we'd really appreciate it. It's linked in the in our dashboard. It's down under the reflection section. So that's where the Jamboards are, and that's where the feedback survey is. So wanted to, let's see, trying to think if there's one other thing that I wanted to point out. No, I think we're good. So, so giving you guys 5 whole minutes now to do that reflection. And so if you could please do both of those items, it's really helpful for us. So with that, if anybody has any specific questions or anything, you're welcome to unmute or send a chat to either me or Hilda.
Dave, quick question. Someone's messaging, and I think it might be just something missing. They're trying to add a strategy or an activity to their platform on MICIP, and it's not allowing them to do so. They said they filled out all the boxes and all of the fields. I'm thinking maybe a start date or an end date or something is missing, that it's not allowing them to.
Hilda, can I clarify real quick?
Please.
Sure.
Yeah, so we've named the strategy, rated it and all that, and we're to the point where we are, let me use exact words, the implementation plan, creating strategy implementation plan. And so when we open it up, we has who owns it, the start and end date. We've added an activity. We added the funding, where it comes from, how it's communicated, and who it's communicated to. And it will not allow us to add to the portfolio. The button doesn't open on the bottom.
Okay. So there might be a variety of issues. Nothing immediately is coming to mind because there's so many things that it could be, including technical issues. So you might have done literally everything right and it's still not working. So Paul, I'm wondering if, you know,
I've been stuck on it for like over a month.
Okay. So Paul.
Yes.
I put, my guess is it sounds like you've tried everything. If you've been stuck on it for a month, you guys went through, you made sure the boxes were checked, all those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And I added, this is what I was going to say earlier. Paul, I'm so glad you brought this up. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of general resources in the dashboard, I added a link to the MICIP help desk. And I think at this point, it's a probably reaching out to the help desk. It sounds like it might be a technical issue. I popped into a room with another participant today that did everything right, and they weren't able to move to a next step. And so I recommended that they reach out to the help desk too. So Paul, I think that's going to be your bet.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you the magical button to click.
Thank you.
All right, if you are staying for the optional session, we're going to take a 15-minute break. And if you are done for the day, then you're welcome to sign out. Make sure you sign out before you head out, please, once you finish your feedback items.
Yeah, in order to get sketch credit, you need to sign in and sign out. So make sure you fill that in on the form.
Excuse me, could you tell me where the sign in and sign out is?
I will put it in the chat for you. So it's right in the dashboard. So it's right there at the top. It's got a little star next to it, but I will put it there for you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Are there breakouts for the
okay.
optional?
No, it'll be a whole group. We'll start around 10:45, I believe, right, Dave? Yep.
Yep, just starting that at 10:45.
Yes, if you are staying for the whole time, just wait till 11:30 and then you can sign out then.
And just as a reminder, the optional session is about the strategy bank. So it's really getting in, how do you get into the strategy bank? How do you add your own strategies to the strategy bank? How do you navigate the strategy bank?